The security footage showed a woman stealing bread at 6:14 a.m. 2 loaves, whole wheat. She didn't run. She walked out the front door like she had paid. The owner of the store, a man worth $1.7 billion, didn't call the police. He got in his car and followed her. She walked for 40 minutes. She turned into a building with no sign, no number, and no city record. Inside were 41 children, eating their only meal of the day. She had been feeding them for 9 years. No one knew. What he discovered next made the bread look like a message. What it exposed about his own company made him sit down on a concrete floor and not speak for 6 minutes. James Caldwell had built Heartland Provisions from a single-corner grocery in a working-class Chicago neighborhood into the largest supermarket chain in the Midwest. 614 stores across Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin. 12 food processing plants. Government supply contracts in 4 states. His face had appeared on the cover of Forbes twice, once in 2018 and again in 2021. His net worth, as of the last public estimate, was $1.7 billion. He was 61 years old. He woke up at 4:30 every morning without an alarm. He drove himself to his flagship store in downtown Chicago every single day, in a black Cadillac Escalade that cost more than most houses in the neighborhoods he passed on the way. He wore the same style of clothes every day. Dark trousers, a crisp white shirt, black leather shoes, polished until they reflected light. He believed in 2 things above all else: order and numbers. Everything that could be counted should be counted. Everything that could be measured should be measured. Waste was a disease. Efficiency was the cure. His father, a Polish immigrant who ran that first small grocery in the back of the yard's neighborhood, had taught him that when James was 9 years old, standing on a milk crate behind the counter. The store sold bread, milk, canned soup, and soap. Every evening, father and son counted every item on every shelf. If a number was off by 1, they found the reason before they went to bed. "If you can't count it, it doesn't exist," his father told him. James had lived by that sentence for 52 years. He had built an empire on it. He had never once questioned whether it was complete. The bread theft wasn't new. His head of security at the downtown store, a man named Frank Miller, had first flagged it 3 weeks earlier. An elderly woman, same time every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. 2 loaves, always whole wheat. She never took anything else. She never looked nervous. She moved through the store like someone who belonged there, picked up the bread, put it in a worn-out cloth tote bag, and walked out the front door. Frank had recommended banning her from the store and filing a report with the Chicago PD. James told him to wait. Not because he felt sorry for her, not because the bread was insignificant, but because the pattern didn't make sense to him. 2 loaves, 3 times a week, for what Frank estimated had been at least 4 months. That was roughly 100 loaves. 100 loaves of whole wheat bread wasn't hunger. Hunger was desperate. Hunger was fast. Hunger grabbed and ran. This woman moved with purpose. She took the same thing every time, at the same time, in the same way. That wasn't theft. That was supply. And James Caldwell had spent his entire career studying supply chains. He didn't report them. He followed them. He wanted to know where 100 loaves of bread had gone. He wanted to know what they were feeding. On a Wednesday morning in the 2nd week of March, James sat in his Escalade in the parking garage of the downtown store at 6:09 a.m. The sun was just starting to glint off the surrounding skyscrapers. The store had been open for 9 minutes. At 6:14, the woman walked in through the automatic doors. She was small, 5 feet tall, maybe less. Thin arms, a faded blue coat with a floral pattern that had been washed so many times it looked like the ghost of a pattern. She moved through the store, slowly, touching nothing on the shelves. She passed the canned goods, the cleaning supplies, the cereal aisle. She walked to the bakery section near the back. She picked up 2 loaves of whole wheat bread. She placed them in the cloth bag she carried on her shoulder. The bag looked older than she was, the fabric frayed at the seams. She turned and walked to the front of the store. She passed 2 open checkout lanes. She didn't slow down. She didn't look at the cashiers. She walked out the front door into the morning light and turned left on the sidewalk. James started his engine. He pulled out of the garage and followed at a distance of about half a block. She didn't look back, not once. She walked south for almost 20 minutes, past the gleaming office towers and into a neighborhood where the buildings grew older and lower. She turned left into a narrow alley behind a row of brick tenements, past a tire shop with 3 cars on blocks and a street vendor selling hot dogs from a cart. She crossed a puddle-filled pothole on a plank of wood that bent under her weight. James left his car at the mouth of the alley and followed on foot. He had never walked through this part of the city. The buildings were low, with tar-patched roofs held down with bricks, open fire escapes, walls made of cinder block and corrugated metal. A church built from 2 shipping containers, children playing with a flattened basketball. The air smelled like diesel fumes and greasy food. James's shoes were worth more than some of the structures he passed. He kept walking. After 40 minutes total, the woman turned into a 2-story brick building on an unpaved street with no name. The building had no sign, no painted number, no gate. The walls were cracked, the mortar crumbling. The windows had no glass, only plywood boards that were propped open to let in air. A rusted water tank sat on the flat roof, tilted slightly like it might fall. There was a concrete step at the entrance, worn smooth by years of feet. James stood outside and listened. He heard children, not the sound of children playing, the sound of children eating, spoons scraping against bowls. 41 of them, though he didn't know the number yet. He was about to. He stepped inside. The ground floor was one large room. Concrete walls, no paint, no plaster. A blackboard made from a sheet of plywood painted black stood against the far wall. On it, a mathematics lesson was written in chalk. Long division, with 3 example problems worked out neatly. 41 children sat on the floor in rows. They were eating. Each child had a bowl made from a cut-open plastic milk jug. Inside the bowls was a paste of bread torn into small pieces, soaked in water and mixed with powdered milk. Some of the children were as young as 3. The oldest looked about 14. They were clean. Their clothes were old. Faded t-shirts, second-hand shorts, dresses with patches. But every piece had been mended. Their hair was combed. They sat in neat rows with a kind of discipline that came from someone who had taught them that, even when you have nothing, you do not sit in chaos. They looked up at James with the same expression. Careful, watchful, the kind of eyes that had learned not to expect anything good from a stranger walking through the door. Near the back wall, the woman stood with her hands in the bread. She was tearing it into pieces and dropping them into a large basin. She saw James. She stopped. She held a piece of bread in each hand. She didn't run. She didn't speak. She just waited. She waited for whatever was about to happen to her the way someone waits, who has been waiting for a long time and has already decided they will not apologize for what they have done. "I own the store," James said. She nodded. She didn't put the bread down. "I know," she said. Her voice was calm, not defiant, not scared. Just calm, like a woman who had already accepted every possible outcome of this moment. "How long?" he asked. She looked at him for a long time before she answered. 9 years, she said. "I started with the store on Archer Avenue. That one closed in 2019. I moved to yours." James looked around the room. He counted the children. He counted them again. 41. He looked at the blackboard. The handwriting was perfect. Each number precise, each line straight. "You were a teacher," he said. She straightened her back just slightly, just enough. "I am a teacher," she said. That sentence landed on James like something physical. Not loud, not dramatic, just heavy. He sat down on a plastic chair near the door. It creaked under his weight. He didn't speak. Not for 1 minute, not for 3, not for 5. 6 minutes. He later told his driver it was 5. It was 6. The children watched him the entire time. Some of them had stopped eating. The youngest ones looked at the older ones to figure out whether they should be afraid. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The bread in the woman's hands was getting warm. Her name was Eleanor Vance. She was 73 years old. She had been born in a small town in rural Mississippi and had walked 4 miles each way to a segregated school every day until she was 16. She earned a teaching degree from Chicago State University in 1974. And for the next 26 years, she taught English and mathematics at a public school on the South Side, one of the most respected in the city. She was known for 2 things: her handwriting and her memory. She could recall any lesson she had ever taught. Students from 1978 remembered her the same way students from 2002 did, as the teacher who never raised her voice and never repeated an instruction. In 2014, the Social Security Administration terminated her benefits. The reason given was a records discrepancy. Her employment file, they said, was incomplete. 26 years of service, and the government said it couldn't verify 12 of them. She fought the decision for 2 years, filing appeals, gathering letters from former colleagues, producing her own records. She lost. By 2016, she had no income, no savings, and no family willing to take her in. Her husband had died in 2003. Her only son had moved to London in 2010 and stopped returning her calls in 2013. What she did have was a building. Her mother, Sarah Vance, had purchased it in 1971 for $4,000. Sarah had dreamed of opening a school, not a public school, a school for children who had no one. She had grown up during the Great Migration and had watched too many children fall through the cracks of a system that was built to sort, not to save. She bought the 2-story building in this forgotten corner of the city with money she had saved over 11 years of working as a seamstress. She planned to open it in 1975. She never did. Her health failed in 1980. She spent 9 years in and out of hospitals. She died of tuberculosis in 1989. The building sat empty for 25 years. Rain came through the roof. Pigeons nested in the window frames. Weeds grew through the cracks in the floor. Neighbors used the downstairs as storage for broken furniture. Nobody cared about it. Nobody remembered what it was supposed to be. When Eleanor lost everything in 2016, she went to the only place she had left. She moved into an upstairs room with a mattress, a kerosene lamp, and a photograph of her mother standing in front of this same building in 1971. Sarah was wearing a white dress in the photograph. She was smiling. Behind her, the building was new. The brick was clean. The shutters were painted green. Eleanor hung the photograph on the wall. Within 3 months, the first child arrived. Her name was Grace. She was 4 years old. Her mother had left her sitting on the concrete step outside the building with a plastic bag containing 1 dress, 1 pair of underwear, and a note written on the back of a receipt from a convenience store. The note said, "I will come back." She never came back. Eleanor heard the child crying at 7 p.m. She brought her inside. She cooked rice on a hot plate and fed her with a spoon. She bathed her with water from a bucket and put her to sleep on the mattress next to her. That was August 2016. By December, there were 5 children. By March 2017, there were 11. Word had spread through the neighborhood, the way word spreads in places where there are no social services and no safety nets. Quietly, mouth to mouth, from one desperate parent to another. A woman in that old brick building who takes children. She doesn't ask questions. She doesn't charge money. She feeds them. She teaches them. By 2019, there were 27. By 2022, 34. By the time James Caldwell followed a woman with 2 loaves of bread in March 2025, There were 41. No nonprofit registration, no government funding, no church donations, no charity drives, no volunteers. Just Eleanor Vance and whatever she could find, borrow, grow in the small patch of dirt behind the building, or, 3 times a week, steal from a store owned by one of the richest men in Illinois. What James had walked into was not a crisis. It was a system. A working, functioning system built by a 73-year-old woman with no funding and no staff. He didn't understand that yet. He wouldn't understand it until he came back the next day, and the day after that. What he was about to discover in that building would make the bread irrelevant. It would make his security cameras and his inventory software look like toys compared to what one woman had built with cardboard and chalk. He had spent his life counting things that made him rich. He was about to meet someone who had spent 9 years counting things that kept children alive. James came back the next morning at 7 a.m. He didn't tell his assistant. He didn't tell his driver. He parked 2 blocks away and walked. The children were already in rows. Eleanor was at the blackboard. The chalk in her hand was barely 2 inches long. She taught English to the younger children first, the ones between 3 and 6. She used a method James had never seen before. She drew pictures of objects on the board, said the word, had the children repeat it, then broke the word into syllables and had them clap along. After 30 minutes, she switched to mathematics for the older children, the ones between 10 and 14. Multiplication and division. She didn't use a textbook. She didn't need one. She wrote problems from memory, solved the first one as a demonstration, and then called students to the board one at a time to solve the rest. When they got it wrong, she didn't correct them. She asked them a question that led them to find the mistake themselves. Then she taught history, all 41 children together. She told them about the civil rights movement and the marches in their own city with so much detail that the smallest children sat completely still with their mouths open. James sat on the same plastic chair and watched for 4 hours. He didn't interrupt. He didn't check his phone. He just watched. He watched a woman teach 41 children across 5 age groups in the same room, with no books, no notebooks, no pencils, no desks, and no electricity. And every child was paying attention. On the second day, he looked more carefully. He stopped watching the teaching and started looking at the walls. There were charts, hand-drawn attendance charts going back to 2017. Every child's name, every day, marked with a small check for present or a circle for absent. There were health charts, each child's weight recorded every month on charts drawn in pen on sheets of paper, taped to the wall. She weighed them on a bathroom scale she had found in a dumpster and carried home. There were reading progress charts, levels 1 through 5. Each child's name with a colored mark. Red for level 1, yellow for level 2, green for level 3, blue for level 4, black for level 5, showing exactly where they were in their reading ability. James pulled one chart off the wall and held it. 23 of the 41 children had moved from level 1 to level 3 or higher in the past 18 months, without textbooks, without notebooks, without a single dollar of government support. He walked upstairs. The second floor had 4 rooms. One was Eleanor's bedroom, a mattress on the floor, a kerosene lamp, and the photograph of her mother. The second room was storage. James opened the door and stood still. 41 folders, each one made from cut-up cardboard boxes, cereal boxes, shipping boxes, detergent boxes, held together with tape and labeled with a child's name in Eleanor's handwriting. He opened the first folder. Inside, a handwritten birth certificate, because many of these children had never been registered. A medical history in blue pen, growth records, behavioral notes, learning milestones, a hand-drawn family tree, showing whatever Eleanor had learned about where the child came from. He opened another folder. Same thing. Another. Same thing. All 41. Every folder complete. He opened the third room. The kitchen. A single hot plate, blackened from 9 years of daily use. A bag of rice that was almost empty. maybe 2 cups left. Powdered milk in a tin with a rusted lid, a small bag of salt, 1 dented can of tomato paste, a plastic bucket for water, a metal spoon and a ladle. That was the entire supply chain feeding 41 children. And the meals were not 3 a day. They were one meal, bread soaked in water and powdered milk in the morning. On days when Eleanor managed to get rice from somewhere, a market vendor who gave her the broken grains at the bottom of the sack, a neighbor who had extra, there was a second meal in the evening. Most days there was not. He opened the 4th room, the sick room, a mattress on the floor, a thermometer that still worked, a bottle of aspirin that had expired 2 years ago, a packet of oral rehydration salts, and a notebook labeled illness log. James opened it. Every illness, every fever, every cough, every rash, every stomach pain written in pen with the date, the child's name, the symptoms, what Eleanor did about it, and how the child responded. Entry after entry after entry, 9 years of entries. He turned to a page from 2020. A boy named Marcus, age 8 at the time, had developed a fever of 103 degrees Fahrenheit that lasted 3 days. Eleanor had bathed him in cool water every 4 hours, given him the expired aspirin in half doses, and stayed awake beside him for 2 nights. On the 3rd day, the fever broke. She had written at the bottom of the entry, "Marcus is strong. He did not cry once." James sat down on the floor of that storage room. He held one of the cardboard folders in his hands. It was the folder for Marcus, now 11 years old. Inside was a note Eleanor had written in 2020. It said, "Marcus has not spoken since he arrived. He draws instead. He draws buildings, very detailed buildings with windows and staircases and doors that open. I believe he will be an architect one day. I am saving his drawings." Clipped to the back of the folder were 14 drawings, all buildings, all detailed, all drawn with pencils that had been sharpened down to 2-inch stubs because there was no money for new pencils. James closed the folder. He put it back in the stack. 41 folders, 41 children, 9 years, no salary, no funding, no recognition from any government, any organization, any church, any person. 1 meal a day, 2 stolen loaves of bread 3 times a week, and every single child was accounted for. Named, tracked, weighed, taught, known. Each one had a folder with their name on it. Each one was a person to Eleanor Vance, not a number. James thought about his own company, his 12 processing plants, his 614 stores, his inventory management software that cost $4.2 million to develop, his compliance department, his HR team of 47 employees whose only job was to track performance metrics. And he looked at a 73-year-old woman who had done more with stolen bread and cardboard folders than his entire infrastructure had ever done for a single child in the community where he made his money. She could name every child. She knew every birthday, every allergy, every fear, every talent. She had counted what mattered. He had counted what sold. James drove back to his office that afternoon. He sat at his desk for 45 minutes without opening his laptop. His assistant, Priscilla, brought him his schedule for the week. He looked at it. A board meeting on Friday, a city council dinner on Saturday at a fancy hotel, a photo opportunity at a school on the West Side on Monday, a school his company had donated computer desks to. He stared at that line. Desks. His company had donated desks. Wooden desks with the Heartland Provisions logo engraved on the side. A photographer had taken pictures. The pictures had been used in the annual corporate social responsibility report. The report had been sent to shareholders. The shareholders had been satisfied, and 5 miles from his flagship store, 41 children were eating bread soaked in water on a concrete floor. James picked up his phone and called his chief financial officer, Edmund Taylor. "Ed, How much do we spend on corporate social responsibility per year? Edmund checked. $2.6 million, sir. The bulk goes to school desk donations, branded scholarship ceremonies, and the annual food drive at Christmas. How many children have we directly housed, fed, or educated with that money in the past 5 years? James asked. Directly, Edmund repeated. Directly, James said. I'll need to pull the reports, sir. Pull them, James said. Get me the answer before Friday. He hung up. He sat at his desk and looked at the Forbes covers framed on his wall. 2 of them, his face on both. He had looked proud in those photographs. He wasn't sure what he looked like now. The answer came on Thursday morning. Edmund brought it personally. He didn't email it. He walked into James's office and placed a single sheet of paper on the desk. The number was 0. $13 million in corporate social responsibility, spending over 5 years, and the number of children Heartland Provisions had directly housed, fed, or educated was 0. The desk donations had been photographed and never followed up on. 3 of the schools had closed since receiving the desks. The scholarship ceremonies had awarded checks on stage in front of cameras, but 11 of the 23 recipients had never cashed them because they couldn't open bank accounts without state IDs they couldn't afford. The Christmas food drive distributed branded Heartland Provisions packages to families pre-selected by a PR agency for maximum media coverage. Not the families who needed food the most, but the families who photographed the best. James read the report 3 times. Then he called a meeting with his entire CSR department. 7 people sat in the conference room on the 80th floor of the Heartland Provisions headquarters. James asked them one question. Can any of you name a single child whose life is measurably different because of something we did? Silence. 7 faces, not one name. He dismissed them. He didn't fire them, not yet. But the thing his father had taught him, if you can't count it, it doesn't exist, was sitting in his chest, like a stone he couldn't swallow. Because Eleanor Vance could count every single one of her children. She could name them. She could tell you their birthdays, their fears, their talents, and she had never owned a computer in her life. James went back to the building on Friday morning. He brought a cashier's check for $500,000. He walked in and handed it to Eleanor. She looked at it. She looked at him. She put it on the table and said, I don't want your money. James blinked. It's $500,000. I know what it is, she said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't sound angry. She sounded like a teacher who was about to explain something important to a student who thought he already knew the answer. I want you to understand what I built before you try to buy it. This is not a project. This is not a charity. This is a school. My mother bought this building to be a school. She didn't finish it. I did. And I didn't finish it so that a rich man could come and put his name on it. James opened his mouth to speak. She held up her hand. Sit down, she said. He sat. She walked him through the building again. But this time she didn't show him charts or folders or the kitchen or the sick room. This time she showed him the children, not as a group, not as a number, one by one. And what she showed him was not a woman struggling to survive. It was a woman who had built something that worked, something that had worked every single day for 9 years. Something that ran on nothing but knowledge, discipline, and bread she took from his shelf. Grace, the first child, now 13 years old, was teaching the younger ones to read. She used a method Eleanor had taught her, the same method Sarah Vance had designed in the 1970s when she planned to open this building as a school. Phonics first, then syllables, then whole words, then sentences, then stories. Grace could read at level 5, the highest on Eleanor's chart. She was teaching level 2. She stood at the blackboard with the same calm authority Eleanor had. Her handwriting was almost identical. A boy named Leo, age 12, managed the building's water supply. He walked to the public fire hydrant 6 blocks away every morning at 5 a.m., with 2 5-gallon jugs strapped to a wooden cart he had built himself from scrap wood and bicycle wheels. He made the trip 3 times, 30 gallons, enough for 41 children to drink, wash their hands, and cook 1 meal. He had been doing this every day since he was 9 years old, and he had not missed a single morning. A girl named Aisha, age 14, kept the health log. She took temperatures every morning with the one working thermometer. She recorded symptoms. She knew which children were allergic to peanuts, which ones had asthma, which ones needed more iron. She had never seen the inside of a hospital herself, but she could identify a fever, an ear infection, and dehydration faster than most adults James had ever met. These children were not being stored. They were not being warehoused. They were not waiting for rescue. They were running a system, and the system had been designed by a woman who had learned it from her mother, who had dreamed of a school in this exact building 54 years ago. James's board meeting on Friday did not go the way he planned. He presented a proposal: redirect $2 million of the annual CSR budget away from branded desk donations and PR-selected food drives and toward building a proper facility at Eleanor's location: classrooms, a kitchen, a medical clinic, legal registration for all 41 children. His board of directors, 9 men and 2 women, listened. Then his vice chairman spoke. Richard Sterling. He was 58 years old. He had been James's business partner for 22 years. They had built Heartland Provisions together. Richard was the numbers man, the legal mind, the one who reviewed every contract, every acquisition, every deal. He was respected, he was careful, and he said, "No, Jim, we are a grocery company. We are not a children's charity. Our shareholders expect returns, not orphanages. If you want to help this woman, do it privately. Don't drag the company into a project that has no measurable ROI." 3 other board members nodded. Richard's father, a retired federal judge, had once told his son something Richard repeated at least twice a year at board meetings. Charity is a photograph. Business is a structure. Never confuse the two. Richard had never confused them. He looked at the numbers. The numbers said no, but the numbers had also said yes to $13 million in CSR spending that had helped exactly 0 children. Richard didn't mention that part. He had calculated correctly about everything he could see. He had not calculated what he could not see. And what he could not see was already in the documents. James didn't argue at the board meeting. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't pound the table or make a speech about moral obligation. He sat through the rest of the agenda. He signed the quarterly report. He shook hands with every board member. And that night, he did something he hadn't done in 30 years. He drove to the south side, 3 hours in traffic. He parked outside the building where his father's grocery store had been. It was a cell phone repair shop now. The shelves that had once held bread and canned milk were gone. James sat in his car for an hour. He thought about the sentence his father had given him 52 years ago. If you can't count it, it doesn't exist. And for the first time in his life, he understood what his father had actually meant. His father had been a shopkeeper. He counted soap and rice and milk on his shelves. But he also counted something else. He counted the children in the neighborhood who came into his shop hungry. He counted the women who couldn't afford milk for their babies. He counted the old men who sat outside his store because they had nowhere else to go. He gave them what he could, not because it was good for business, but because they were people who could be counted. His father hadn't meant that only numbers matter. He had meant, count what matters, count the people, count the need, and James had spent 52 years counting the wrong things. It took a 73-year-old woman who stole bread to show him what his own father had been trying to teach him all along. He came back to the city on Monday morning. He didn't go to the office. He drove straight to the brick building. He sat on the plastic chair. He looked at Eleanor and said, "Tell me what you need." "Not money." "Tell me what you need." Eleanor looked at him the way she looked at students who had finally arrived at the right answer after a long time of getting it wrong. She said, I need someone to register these children. 23 of them don't officially exist. No birth certificates, no social security numbers. The government doesn't know they're alive. I need a kitchen that doesn't run on a hot plate. I need a water connection so that a 12-year-old boy doesn't have to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning every day for the rest of his childhood. I need medicine that isn't expired. I need someone to fix the roof before the winter comes. And I need you to understand one thing. She paused. This building belongs to my mother. It was her dream. I'm keeping it alive. But I'm 73 years old. I won't be here forever. I need to know that when I'm gone, someone will keep counting these children. James wrote everything down on the back of a brown envelope. 6 items. He folded the envelope. He put it in his shirt pocket. He stood up, walked to his car, and drove away without saying a word. Stay with me. What happens next is not what anyone expected. 3 months later, the brick building had a new roof, concrete, reinforced, rated for 10 years of heavy snow. It had running water from a new main line connected to the city grid. It had a kitchen with a gas stove, a full-size refrigerator that had been removed from a Heartland Provisions warehouse, and enough food in storage for 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. It had a sick room with real medicine, a new thermometer, a blood pressure cuff, and a visiting nurse who came every Tuesday and Thursday. 23 children who had never been registered with the government now had birth certificates filed with the state of Illinois. Each one had a social security card. Each one existed. James had paid for all of it. Not from the company budget, not from Heartland Provisions, from his personal account. $2.3 million. His board had said no. Richard Sterling had said no. James had said yes with his own money. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't issue a press release. He didn't hold a ribbon-cutting ceremony. He did not put the Heartland Provisions logo anywhere on the building. There was no logo. There was a name, painted in blue letters, above the entrance, in the same spot where the building had been blank for 54 years. The name read, the Sarah Vance Learning House, Eleanor's mother's name. The school she never got to open. The dream she carried from 1971 until the day she died, finally finished. Not by money, but by her daughter, and by 2 loaves of stolen bread. Richard Sterling resigned from the Heartland Provisions Board of Directors 6 weeks after the building reopened. Not because of the building, but because of what the building uncovered. When James's legal team began the process of registering the 23 undocumented children, they had to pull records. Birth records, displacement records, social welfare files. And in those records, they found something that no one had expected. 14 of the 41 children in Eleanor's care had been displaced from communities where Heartland Provisions had built processing plants. Communities in downstate Illinois and rural Ohio where land had been purchased for industrial development. Families had been relocated, and financial compensation had been promised in writing. The compensation had never been delivered, not partially, not late, never. The families had been moved. Their farmland had been bulldozed. Processing plants had been built on top of where they used to live. And the paperwork promising them payment had been filed, stamped, and forgotten. 14 children, 14 families that had been erased. The same company that had spent $13 million on branded PR and couldn't name one child it had helped, had directly created 14 of the children who needed help. The documents were clear, the dates matched, the community names matched, and Richard Sterling had personally overseen 3 of those land acquisitions. His signature was on the compensation agreements. He had never followed up. He had never checked whether the families received what they were promised. He resigned on a Tuesday morning. He released a 1-paragraph statement that said he was pursuing personal business interests. The Chicago Tribune reported it as a routine board departure. It was not routine. It was the quietest collapse James had ever seen, and he hadn't filed a single complaint. He hadn't made a single phone call. The documents did the work. They always do. 1 year after, the Sarah Vance Learning House opened. It had 63 children. A second floor had been added. 2 full-time teachers had been hired, both former students of Eleanor's from her public school days, who had heard what she was doing and came to help without being asked. One of them, a woman named Doris, had been in Eleanor's English class in 1996. She said she still remembered the lesson on Toni Morrison that changed how she thought about stories. Grace, now 14, was preparing for the high school entrance exams. She was expected to score in the top 5% citywide. Leo no longer woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning to haul water. The new plumbing had given him his mornings back. He spent them drawing mechanical diagrams of the cart he had built, taking it apart, and rebuilding it better. He had been accepted into a junior engineering program at the University of Illinois on a full scholarship, arranged not by James but by an engineering professor who had visited the learning house and seen the cart sitting in the courtyard. Marcus was 12 years old. He still didn't talk much, but his building drawings were getting bigger, more detailed, more ambitious. A professor of architecture at IIT had seen one of his drawings pinned to the wall during a visit. The drawing had been signed in pencil at the bottom. Marcus, architect, Sarah Vance Learning House. The professor had taken a photograph of it. She hadn't said anything to Marcus. She had simply started a file with his name on it. He didn't know that yet, but it was going to matter. Eleanor Vance turned 74 in August. James came to the celebration. There was no cake. There was macaroni and cheese, fried chicken, and collard greens cooked by the older children in the kitchen that now had running water and a working stove. The smell filled the entire building and drifted out into the street. Neighbors who had walked past this building for 30 years without looking at it came to the door and looked inside for the first time. James sat on the same plastic chair he had sat on the first day. It still creaked. He watched Eleanor move through the room. She touched each child's head as she passed them. She straightened a collar. She wiped a face with the corner of her apron. She whispered something to a boy who laughed so hard he covered his mouth with both hands. She stopped at the photograph on the wall. Her mother, Sarah, standing in front of this building in 1971. Eleanor straightened the frame. She didn't say anything. A girl named Maya, age 6, pulled on Eleanor's dress and handed her a drawing. It was a picture of the building. Blue roof, yellow sun, green grass that didn't exist in real life, but existed in Maya's imagination. At the bottom of the drawing, in orange crayon, in letters that leaned to the right because Maya was left-handed, it said, "Mama's house." Eleanor folded the drawing carefully and walked upstairs. She placed it inside the cardboard folder, labeled Maya. Folder number 47. Now, 6 more than when James first walked in. Each one complete. Each one a life that someone decided was worth counting. James never put a logo on the building. He never held a press conference. He never mentioned the Sarah Vance Learning House in a shareholder report or a speech. But he made one change to his office. On the wall behind his desk, where the 2 Forbes covers had hung for years, he took them down. In their place, he put a single framed piece of paper. It was the attendance chart from 2017, the first one Eleanor had ever made. 41 names written in blue ink on cardboard. Every day, marked with a small check, hand-drawn lines, no software, no spreadsheet. Just a woman who woke up every morning and decided that these children existed, that they mattered, and that someone should write their names down. James looked at that chart every morning before he opened his laptop, before he checked the stock price, before he read the revenue reports. 41 names, the only numbers that had ever truly mattered. If a woman stole from you every week for 9 years to feed children you never knew existed, and then refused your money until you understood what she had built, would you sit down and listen, or would you call the police? Leave your answer below. Great. Man, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that whole story. I'm so curious where you guys watching from right now. Drop your city or state in the comments. I love seeing how far our community reaches. And seriously, how did this story make you feel? Did it hit you the way it hit me? Let me know your honest reaction down below. On a more serious note, I just want to send a ton of love out to you and your family. I truly hope you're all staying safe and healthy out there in this crazy world. Please take care of each other. And hey, if you have a wild, incredible, or just plain unbelievable story of your own, the comment section is your stage. I read as many as I can, and you guys have the most amazing lives. If you felt a connection here today and want to be part of this little community we're building, a quick like and a tap on that subscribe button means the world. No pressure at all, but it lets me know you're out there. All right, that's it from me. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.